Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Debating for America's Youth. Today, I'm going to interview two awesome guests. Today, I'm interviewing Quest Sandel and Sydney Glickson. So, to begin, a little bit about both of the people here today. Quest is a Tournament of Champions Congressional Debate Committee member and also the coach of a TOC and NSDA National Champion. Sydney was a parliamentarian in the 2020 Tournament of Champions, as well as an NSDA finalist in Congressional Debate in the past. Welcome, both of you.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. And one other note is they're going to both be coaches at Ascend for this fall semester. And we'll talk more about that at the end of this interview.
And I just wanted to stop in and let you know that if you subscribe to this channel and comment on this video that you liked it and want to work with Ascend, we'll be choosing one person and we're going to give them $50 off the fall program. So make sure to subscribe and comment down below if you want to be a part of Ascend, and I'll reach out to you and we'll get you info and we'll get you that $50 off the camp. So make sure to subscribe and to comment down below. Thanks for watching.
So just to get started, for people and students who are in congressional debate, do you have any self-practices that would be good for them to get better and improve in congressional debate?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I started doing as a sophomore in debate was reading the news every single day. And I think that for a lot of students, we fall into this rut of practicing speaking skills, right? So you're going to run fluency drills, like the pen drill, over and over again. And that's very important. Like, you do need to be a good speaker. But congressional debate is unique in that you also have to know what you're talking about. And I've been in a lot of finals rounds where there have been great speakers who have been very easily taken down by other debaters because they just don't know what they're saying, right? So it's super easy for me to have the cleanest refutation of your argument because your argument doesn't make any sense. The best way I found to avoid that is just by reading the news every single day, right? I get 4 briefings to my email. Even now that I'm in college and I've graduated, I still read the news every day like that. And when you go to tournaments, even if you're not debating the bill you read an article on, it always circles back. So there have been cases where a student has come to me with a piece of legislation and I'm coaching them and they've said there are no negs. And I'm like, no, yeah, there are. I read a Wall Street Journal article on this literally 3 hours ago. Here's your neg. And so for most congressional debaters, especially at a high level, but also novices, speaking skills can be pretty easily attained with the same 3 to 5 drills if you just run them like over and over again and you practice speaking consistently. But it is much harder to learn everything about everything, which is the secondary expectation that all congressional debate judges have. And so consistently reading news is probably the most helpful way to do that. In terms of drills, I would also run speaking-wise. After I read a news article, I would give a 30-second to 1-minute extemp speech on it. No evidence. I mean, I just read the article, so I would still have context. And just talk. Getting comfortable with talking about intellectual topics, using the proper terminology, and getting natural about it is something that almost every debater can improve at, even at a really high level.
Yeah, totally. I'd agree with everything Sydney just said. And the only things I'd add to it is staying on that train of thought on argumentation. When students are arguing, I think there's 2 questions I do not hear answered, and I mean like 90% of the time I don't hear these 2 questions. It's why and how. I never do debaters actually address this. And the debaters who do address it are normally the ones winning nationals, TOC, Harvard, and Glenbrooks. Those are the students winning those tournaments. The reason those are so important is because as a judge, when you're sitting there, most of the time you're saying, okay, everybody's especially in out loud, everybody's a powerful speaker. Everybody knows exactly how Congress works, and they're able to make a decent argument, and they sound like they're right. But as a judge, you're sitting there like, how do I know they're right? Who is the most right? It's actually a very hard task judging Congress. So when you're in that situation, what you end up doing is defaulting to whoever actually gives you the reasoning why. That's why warranting on your evidence is just so important. It's the reason why saying that instead of just saying today's legislation will combat racism, telling me how exactly will it combat racism and why is this an accurate statement? Why is my evidence to be believed over everybody else in the chamber who's giving me evidence that either says the same thing or just a completely contradictory item. I think those are the biggest things. And the way you can do that at home is literally just reading through your case and asking yourself, why is this true? How is that accurate? why is this true? I mean, going down each link of your argument and asking yourself that question, if you can go link by link and answer why it's all true, I promise you, you'll have one of the strongest cases going to any round you'll ever participate in. And that's including the national final round, including the TOC final round. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'll say I was in a NSDA national qualifying tournament, and I asked that question. Someone came up there and gave great impacts. I just said, well, how do those impacts connect to the bill at all? And that's when their arguments started to break down because they weren't really prepared for that. But if you have an answer or even ask that question, you can stand out. And going back to what Sydney was saying, I completely agree about reading an article and then coming up with a little speech on the spot. What I started doing is watching back old congressional debate videos and listening to their speeches and then coming up with extemporaneous rebuttals or speeches, later round speeches for those speeches I just heard. And on this channel, actually, we have the full round of congressional debate provided by a Senate debate camp. So you could just watch through that, listen to the speeches given by Hunter and Isaac and Nick, and just listen to those and then come up with those refutations and that later speech. So you can get better at giving those speeches on the spot, which is a core tenet of congressional debate.
Before you can refute those speeches, you'll need a solid 2 hours of research, because some of those arguments are just beyond hard. I mean, Quest and I both said after that round that if any real debate round had those arguments in it, it wouldn't even be a battle for who won first place. Any of those arguments, it would have been the judge would have gone, that's it, it's over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And then going back to what Quest was kind of talking about, do you guys have any ways to come up with good questions? I mean, asking the why and the how are really good. Is there any other tips you have for asking those good questions in the debate round?
Yeah, Quest, I can take this one if you want.
Yeah,
sure. So what I used to do as a speaker is, as I was listening to every speech, I would think to myself, did they warrant their claim, right? If they didn't warrant their claim, very easy. You ask them why or how. And if they don't know, then that's convenient for you. If they do, then you can just go into a line of questioning as to whether why or how is right. If they do warrant their claim, I think a lot of the times Congress speakers make warrants that may be statistically true or could make sense, but they aren't logical. So for example, there are all sorts of arguments that are true, just super illogical. And it's pretty easy to use logic to compel a judge to say, even if this argument could be upheld by whatever data they presented to you, does it make any sense, right? Why would someone do this? Or why would a country do this? Or how is it possible to regulate that? And so bringing common sense into the debate, even though we're really data-focused people, is a good way to come up with questions that appeal to judges on a broader scale. I know that whether I'm judging or debating, I like to think about, could my mom or my dad, right, walk into this room and understand why I would ask this question? Is it a question that they would also want to know the answer to? Because judges are looking for those questions, right? They don't care if 17.2% is a marginal error that could change whether or not 3 states will affirm this amendment, right? It's irrelevant. But they are thinking, okay, so you're telling me this bill can fix the whole tax code? How is that possible, right? It doesn't make any common sense. So I think that's the kinds of questions that appeal to judges and get to more fundamental parts of debate.
Exactly. And then to add to that, I think when you are in any type of cross-examination situation, your number one goal, you actually got to take a page out of the playbook of the legal field, which is you got to cast reasonable doubt on their argument. I always tell students, the idea that you're just going to drop somebody's argument in 30 seconds, I mean, get it out of your head. I guess periodically it's going to happen, but that must be a really bad argument if you're dropping it in only 30 seconds, to the point where I would say maybe you shouldn't even be cross-examining that argument in the first place. So we should be focusing on the idea of casting reasonable doubt. Same thing that lawyers do all the time. Think about your judges as a jury of your peers judging you on the round, because I mean, most things would show that the people who make up juries are actually pretty similar in demographic and age and even ideology as the people judging congressional debate rounds. The parallels are actually quite stunning. So focus on casting reasonable doubt. And the best way to do that is evaluate their argument through the links of their argument all the way through and do the work for them. Don't just think about what they gave you. Think about, okay, if this argument to increase employment in the United States for young people, for Generation Z student people, to be accurate, for it to be true, what do they need to prove? Go through that argument on your own for them, do better than they did, and then think, okay, now let's examine what should have been done versus what they did. No, almost every single time, because of the 3-minute constraint of Congress, you'll notice there's big differences between what you say they should have gotten through and what they actually said. Compare and contrast, and that'll normally give you the holes that you're going to attack in your cross-examination.
That completely makes sense. And then, Sydney, we were talking about earlier how there's some simple drills you can do to get better at speaking, and then like the next step is like that research. For people who still are facing speaking nerves or need improvement, like getting good at giving those speeches, do you have any like recommendations for how people can get better at giving speeches, especially if they're really nervous before they get up?
Yeah, so the high school I went to has a team of almost 200 students, but 100 of them are freshmen with no public speaking experience, right? So day one, they show up, and honestly, we just do gavel debates for a long time, because getting people out of their head when they're speaking is the most important part to starting to create fluency, right? If you're worried about giving the speech, it's not going to come out of your mouth. So we have freshmen do gavel debates. Obviously, that's kind of hard over the Zoom context, but I think you can mimic the same kind of experience and just talk. And that can be as simple as talking to no one, talking to your dog. I know that I used to talk when I was driving just because, why not? Like, it's a time I have just to talk and practice talking. And the more that you just work on speaking in general, the better the words are going to come out of your mouth in a high pressure environment. I think for people who want more feedback, it's always good to talk to someone, even if they don't have debate experience, right? So parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, they're still going to be able to get the basics of like fluency, or they're going to notice if you say like every third sentence or And so they can give a lot of valuable feedback on your speaking skills, even though they might not be debaters by trade.
And taking those skills that Sydney's talking about, those drills that she's talking about, I think the best way to utilize them in your day-to-day career is to not try to employ them all in a day. Don't do every drill Sydney just said in one day and try to improve. And this is one of the most common mistakes I see young students make rather consistently, actually, is they need to go after every single drill that they hear from an amazing former debater like Sydney, and they want to employ those things. That's not how it goes. You have 4 years if you're a freshman, you have 3 years if you're a sophomore, 2 if you're a junior, and if you're a senior, you still have the whole rest of the season, to improve. Highlight your biggest areas of need and literally focus on it one step at a time. It will be the most helpful way to employ all the drills that you learn. Otherwise, it's not going to have that much of an effect on you at all as a debater. You want to highlight an area, improve that as much as you can, then move on to the next. I always tell my students, trying to be really good at congressional debate, it's like building a house. You got to go one step at a time. If you try to do anything too quickly, the whole thing's going to crumble when you get to the final product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll add to that. What I would do a lot of the times is I would, like when I got my arguments for a specific bill, I would read through the entire argument or like give like kind of a mock speech on that, because sometimes what I've noticed is that people can like have like a good argument, but then when they're giving the speech on the argument, and since they don't write down every single word that they're saying, is they can't find some of the words. So I would say that like before you even get the bills, just like giving speeches, and then when you're in those situations, the words come to you better and you have that vocabulary and the ability to kind of give more extemporaneous speeches is like a good practice to be in and a good habit to be in. So I know we talked about research a little bit before. Are there any other tips? We talked about like just reading the news every single day. When you specifically have a bill, are there any good research tips to kind of getting those good arguments for the round?
I like to think about argumentation of research. And to be fair, I've talked to, a lot of debaters. Some of them definitely do disagree with this mindset. But I really think that the best arguments are like extensions on the sponsorship that don't have to go very far, but just have to make things more obvious to judges. And so kind of in that sense, I don't care if you have the best nuanced article in the world, right? In a way, as a judge, I only care about your data in the sense that it's there and it proves things to be true. So really what I think debaters and judges are looking for is, can you pull things together logically, warrant your claims, and link them together, and then provide enough data to show me that even though you're 14, I should give you some level of legitimacy in this argument. So when it comes to research, I do an hour of background research on a bill I've never heard of before. So if this was something like, I've never heard of this, organization, I'm going to do a background for an hour, just read. And then at that point, I should have a pretty good understanding of where this debate is going. If you've read for an hour, you know the general af and the general neg. And from there, I take a step back, walk away from my computer, give it an hour or a day, and I say like, okay, so what? why do I care, right? Not Sydney Glickson debater, but just Sydney Glickson, right? Why does she care at all that this is in Congress? And I think the best arguments come from the genuine side of us as people that says like, no, I passed this bill because this person will be affected. And then you find that level of nuance in the kind of humane side of the debate. Or if it's not as interesting of a debate from a personal side, you say, I thought about this and like, there's a huge logical flaw. Like you're not going to see a piece of research that presents the logical flaw. A good example was we had something where the budget had to be passed line by line in one tournament I went to. And according to data, that actually makes sense. Like more people will agree on a specific thing. But think about it conceptually, and you realize Congress can't pass the budget as a whole. Could you imagine Congress passing every line of the budget every year? It's like they would never get out of session. So common sense can come up with good arguments, but you have to step away from your computer. And I think that should be paired with research.
Before you jump in there, Quest, I just have one question. So for big tournaments like NSDA, TOC, NCFLs, where you have so many bills you have to prepare for and such a limited amount of time, like you talked about spending an hour on each topic. Or is there a way that like people could kind of maybe make their research more efficient, especially when they have a huge amount of bills for every single round if they're going to plan to go all the way and win the tournament?
Yeah, and that's where reading news every day comes in. So if you're reading news every day for 20 to 30 minutes or less, 15 to 20 minutes, you're going to get a bill on most things and already know the hour of practice research because over the past year, you've read news. So you have done an hour of research basically incidentally. I know when I have off times, I give my students like climate change bills and make them research it so that when they actually get a climate change bill, which they inevitably will, they already read all the big articles, right? They already know a core amount of research. So if it's something brand new, do an hour. Otherwise, if you're keeping updated on new information and general studies that are coming out, you're going to have a solid enough base that you can probably shorten that time pretty significantly.
Yeah, congressional debaters kind of need to be more skeptical in general. I feel like far too often they hear the sponsor and then they say, okay, well, solvency's gone. Like if they're on the affirmation, can't run that anymore, debate over. And in all my in all the rounds of Congress I've watched, I hardly ever see that actually happen where solvency's truly been proven. And at the very least, the negation, they're not just going to roll over and be like, okay, solvency's gone. We concede, sponsor wins. They're going to refute the solvency, and which gives you a lot of ground to go. That same thing I was talking about with the sponsorships. I would say, the cross-examination also applies to how you should evaluate sponsorships and overall cases on the affirmation and negation. You should think about each case from the point of view of, okay, what do they need to prove in order for my side to win this debate? I don't need to think about the most far out there unique issue. I need to think about it in terms of the stock, in terms of how do we win, how does my side, whether it's F or neg, win this debate in the stock world, the most stock arguments are, how do we win? Once you determine that, you'll notice and you start to evaluate the rest of the speakers that there's major holes in proving the stock to be true. That's how a lot of debaters that I've coached have found great success, is by looking for those holes, proving that, okay, my own side hasn't even told you this super major thing for the affirmation to win this debate. I might be the 15th speaker, like the 8th AF, 6th AF, but I need to get you to understand this point because it will change your understanding of the debate. And most of the time, judges will be like, yes, that's what I wanted to hear. Because, believe it or not, judges, when they see a bill about Saudi Arabia, like the Sun mock round, they actually don't care too much about the unique issues. What they care most about is the human rights crisis in Yemen. That's what the judges care about. So if you want to appeal to the judges on a level of something they care about, you're going to need to talk about that main issue. And you're going to have to find ways to talk about that in a unique way from the sponsor, even though you're talking about the stock. The best way to do that is figure out where your side fails and where the other side, what pieces of the other side, what pieces have your argument that the other side isn't refuting. All that culminated will lead to a really strong 3-minute speech that is based off of what's happening in the round, and judges will appreciate it.
I would also
that makes a lot of sense.
I was really skeptical of this as a debater, and I think there's skepticism about this theory because we feel like if we're sitting in the round and we actually know what's going on, right? We have done all the research. You have a great speech. You're like, this person totally took my argument, right? They said the word solvency. And so internally, as a debater, it sounds like your argument has been completely taken, like it's gone. But what you have to remember is no one has the level of familiarity that you do with your speech, and they probably don't have the level of familiarity that you do with the other person's speech. The only reason you know that person's speech so well is because you wrote it too, right? Everyone else in the room is like, oh, this is a new idea. I know that in the Harvard 2019 round, there was another speaker who had the exact same speech as me with the same evidence even. And he went much earlier in the round. And I was like, wow, that was my speech. Like, we have the same points of data and everything. So I just kind of sat there for a while. I didn't have a solid backup plan. And I was like, you know, I don't feel like that was the best explanation it could be of that. You know, I think I can take this a level further. I think I can do an extra step that will pull my judges on board. So I gave the same speech, right? I gave the speech I brought. I changed the data. I did not repeat the same data points, but the speech was conceptually the same. And I ranked 5th, right? So I gave the same arguments that were given maybe 4 or 5 cycles earlier. And my judges liked my explanation because it took it one step further, right? I had one level of impact that the other person didn't. And so that was my moment of being like, okay, maybe everyone telling me this is right because it works. And I think that I've seen it happen in a lot of rounds, so.
Exactly. I was actually Sydney's parliamentarian when she was in 2019 Senate finals at nationals, semifinals when I was her parley, and it was and I gave her first, by the way. She got first place from me. You could go check the parley score to be clear. And one of the main reasons why was because Saudi Arabia was one of the topics that we debated in that round. And that debate, I mean, it went all over the place. I mean, I heard about 30 different takes on 30 different areas of Middle East policy. And when Sydney debated, all I wanted to hear was, will this end the human rights crisis in Yemen or not? And she talked about that. Easy first place vote. And the other judges agreed for the most part too. I think she won the round overall with the judges. It is not just something that we as coaches are like, this is just what we like. It has been something that judges have proven to like over and over and over again.
Yeah, debaters just have to get out of their heads, right? Yes, someone gave the same argument as you. You can probably find 50 different studies with this argument because it's a good argument. And if it's a good argument, you should, in fact, give it. But don't give the same pieces of data.
Agreed. Last thing I'll say on it is I coached Rohit Jawar, and many people have asked me, like, you know, how does he come up with his arguments? They're so strong. I was like, if you watch the 2 biggest tournaments he won, 2019 NSDA Senate or 2020 TOC, somebody brings up very similar arguments to him before he speaks. In each round, somebody does it. In Senate, I think it was multiple people who brought up the very similar argumentation, but it was the evidence you use and your ability to not just be different from the judges, but to tell the judges, speak directly to them and tell them, this is why I'm different. They want judges far too often. There's somebody that the debaters thought won, and then there's the winner of the round. The person who actually wins the round is the person who speaks directly to the judges. Speak directly to them and your rankings will jolt up because they just want to understand what's happening like 60% of the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. And then adding what you were talking about, Quest, about skepticism, I think a lot of the times like younger and like more novice debaters can get really intimidated. And I'll be honest, I was the same way in like looking up to these like really good debaters and being like, well, they're right and I'm wrong. But then thinking, wait a second, everyone's, arguments has some sort of flaw or is not perfect, and like everyone can be questioned on their logic or their data. And so I think the moment where I realized, wait a second, like my data, like I could debate against this, person who I've been looking up to. It's kind of an insane moment, especially when people start breaking to higher levels of rounds, like getting to those like higher levels. I think it could be intimidating, but realizing that like, you got to be skeptical of everyone and not just, take everything at face value. And also adding off what you were saying, Sydney, is if you have the same like kind of points as someone else, you could do what you were talking about, or you could like quantify their stuff. If you don't feel like they really like explained like the data behind it, then you could be like, well, they said this. Let me tell you why this is true. Let me quantify it. So that could be another way you could have the same points, but not give the same speech. So I completely agree with that. And my last question,
I was just going to add one thing. For all younger students out there, I think what I tell my students all the time, and I found it to be very helpful, is just anytime you get put in a really good round, like if you get put up against Sydney Glickson, right, in your Congress round, the judges don't know Sydney Glickson. They have no idea who Sydney Glickson is. Unless they judged her once before, which, unlikely. Most of your judges are parents who don't know the debaters. They don't know that they don't have the debate rankings memorized. They don't know the top 6 at Harvard like the back of their hand. They have no idea. They don't have resumes of everybody right in front of them at these tournaments. All they're doing is based off of what's about to happen in the round in front of them. And most of the time, that's where the biggest upsets in Congress happen, when we put resumes aside, when debaters realize that judges don't know anybody in the round, anybody at all, and they're just going off of what they see for the next 3 hours. That's when upsets happen. Just keep your confidence high and remember that what you feel is not what the judges feel. They see you as just as legitimate as everyone else in the chamber.
Yeah, I remember my junior year at TOC. I didn't think I was going to break it all, and I broke to sems. And I walked into the room and I knew every debater in there by name. I never talked to them. They're all really good. So I was just, sitting in the back like, oh my gosh, look at how amazing these people are. And I was like, well, I made it. I might as well just give it my all. And, I know they're better than me, or at least that's what I felt, right? Because I've seen them in finals rounds and I wasn't in those rounds. And you just have to argue your best. Like, if you put your best foot forward, you will do your best, and you can't do any better than your best, right? That's the best you can do. And like, my judges, they saw that, and some of the debaters did not break to finals, and I did, and I even was shocked. Like, I remember thinking, really? Like, I was better than Joe Schmo's in all the finals rounds. But you have to put a little bit more faith in yourself, and debaters are really hard on themselves competitively, and it's never going to feel, and I think this is a sentiment a lot of really good debaters share, it doesn't ever feel like you're always the best in the room. Like, even really good debaters do not walk into rounds and think they're going to crush it. I know from speaking to really good friends and from my own experiences, I walked into finals rounds and I was crossing my fingers that I would do well in that round. Even though I knew that my resume had built me up to be qualified, it still feels intimidating. So new debaters have to remember, it's not like they're the ones feeling the intimidation and the rest of the room is all happy dandy, oh, it's going to be great. Even the person who you're terrified of is also terrified that they could lose. And what they're really scared of is losing to someone like you, because they think they're pretty good, even if they don't know if they're the best. And so when a nobody does really well, it's like you had the confidence to put yourself out there and you're good, right? Own up to it, live up to it a little bit. And that's something that I think novices can forget, which is good debaters don't live in fear of us not doing well, right? We're always concerned that someone who we've never heard of is going to do something that one-ups us, and we couldn't even see it coming. And you can only do that if you're a new debater, if you actually try. Most of the time you can. Like, there's nothing that special about the best debaters, right? They just put more time in, they've had more practice. And so there's nothing that stops a unknown debater or someone who isn't always in finals rounds from having a really smart argument that can totally take down someone who's won national tournaments before.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of the times, like, the people I noticed in speech and debate freshman year, the people who I looked up to, by the end of my junior year, I was getting the same rankings as they were, right? So you start to notice, like, it doesn't matter how good you are, like, your freshman year. I think people get, like, caught up on that. Like, they're not winning tournaments. They feel really bad about it. But then when you realize that, like, yeah, like you were saying, you put in time, you have the experience, you can start to be that good, right? But you don't get caught up on not, like, winning certain tournaments. Just, like, put your best foot forward, work really hard, and you realize that, like, people, the situation you were in, they'll look up to you just like you looked up to other people before you, right? So it's kind of that cycle that you don't really realize you're a part of until you kind of look back.
And good debaters aren't celebrities, right? They're doing the same thing you are. They're doing the same research you are. They're probably reading the same articles you are. They have the same nerves that you do. And sometimes they don't break. So it's good to remember that even if somebody has really infamous name on the circuit and you feel like they are the debate god, right? They are still a person. They're still somebody who has to practice speaking, who has to do the same research. And there will be times that they don't do well. And it doesn't mean they're a bad debater, just that everybody does well when they put their best foot forward. And when you let nerves get the best of you, whether you're a novice or you're an advanced debater, it's going to hinder your performance. So you just have to kind of step out of your shell and put yourself out there.
Definitely. And then the last question before we start discussing a sim debate camp is how would you, I know we talked about a lot of different like ways for people to do well congressional debate. What is like one thing you would say to help people stand out in a debate round? I mean, especially in these big rounds like, you know, TOC and NSDA final rounds, these like huge tournaments where there's so many good people. How does one person stand out to the judge and like end up winning the tournament?
I can take this one first. Basically, what I always tell students is be you. To stand out in a round, you just gotta be you. So many times debaters will ask, how do I, I'll name some like Ascend staffers because I don't want to name drop other people. How do I be like Nick DeVito? You know, how do I be like Rohit Jawar? You know, stuff like that. And it's, you don't be like Nick. Do not be like Nick DeVito. Do not be like Rohit Jawar. You know, if your name's Joe B. Joe, please, please do. That will, if you ever win a major tournament, it's going to be because you're you. You know, when I have had the pleasure of coaching a few students to higher level rounds, and all of them get to that point where like, okay, how do I get from the national sems to the national final round? They ask me that question. You know, I say, okay, well, your personality, you know, you're funny, you're sarcastic. Well, we want to show the judges that personality in the round. Make a sarcastic joke. Don't insult the other side, but make a sarcastic joke in the round. Show them a little about who you are. If you are like loud, you know, we'll use Rohit as the example. What many people don't know about him is he's, you know, everybody knows he's a very loud debater, but he's also a very loud person. Like I've had, like last year was the senior year at Kennedy, and there was a time where I was teaching like the intermediate to varsity kids on one side of the room, and he was working with novices on the other side of the room, and he was so he's just talking to them about like claims, and I had to be like, Rohit, please stop. Like, I need you to quiet down. I cannot hear myself think. Like, and he started succeeding when he was just himself, when he let that personality shine through. You know, I know Nick, same thing. You know, the Nick that you see in the Congress round, I mean, it's kind of similar to the Nick that you meet in real life.
The exact same Nick you meet in real life. There's nothing different.
You know, that is the best piece of advice I can give is figure out what look at your own personality. And if you have a hard time gauging what your personality is, ask other people. They'll gladly tell you. Ask your teammates, ask your coach. And in Congress, that's why I love Congress so much, because you don't have to like, it's not who's the best at a certain thing. You know, like we all have to be like this and the best person at it wins. It is figure out who you are and then let that personality shine through, and then you have the best shot at winning whatever tournament you're going through. Judges want to see you. They want to get to know you. They want that 3-minute speech to get to know you. It's the same reason why politicians in the real world, the ones who come off as real, the ones who come off as believable or authentic, they win elections. They just do. You know, that's most presidential elections is won by the person who gets higher grades in authenticity, who gets higher grades in realism. That person, believability, that person just wins. And to do that by magnifying their personality traits. So to all debaters out there, I think the message is, I promise you, you are good enough. You don't need to be like anyone else. You are good enough. I don't know who everybody, you know, who's going to watch this is, but I do know you're good enough. And once you believe that and decide to shine your own personality through and show everybody what you're made of, that is when you'll start seeing the highest levels of success.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I know that I was told by other competitors that I was either, you know, too sarcastic at times, or the very standard, like, you're a very loud and assertive woman in the debate rounds kind of comments. And I never got it from judges. And one of the things that I always felt was like, I am a loud person. Quest knows I can be a rather sarcastic person. I'm a kind of pushy person, right? That's my personality. Like, I want what I want. And if I think it's right, I will try and get it very hard. And I didn't ever let that go away in Congress rounds. There were times I think I took my comments too far, right? I have videos of me speaking where I said things where I was like, that might have been over the line. But it made this persona where people knew that, yeah, Sydney was 4'11" and she had to lower the mic at NSDA, right? But also, she straight up told someone that I wouldn't sacrifice my firstborn child for Instagram as a response to a question. So, like, sometimes I think you have to just play with Congress more and get out of the, oh, I'm wearing my suit and tie and, you know, my pin of an American flag and I'm a senator. Because we aren't senators. We are between the ages of 14 and 18 when we're doing congressional debate, and we're real people. And so you might have the stoic mindset and ideology and appearance of a 45-year-old or 60-year-old man in Congress, but I kind of doubt it. I think for the most part, you're someone more real. And judges don't mind seeing a little bit of like the high school you shine through as long as it's done appropriately. And so, yeah, if you are a pushy person, you can be a little pushy in a Congress round, and you're not going to get docked for it. I find standing out to be easier when you have something that you can buy into, right? For some people, that's really beautiful rhetoric, right? And I mean, like, that's usually where we go. We say, I'm going to stand out by giving those fluent, nice statements that everyone's going to leave the room wanting to quote on one of those like letter boards. Everyone is not that person. I was not that person, right? Like, I bought the T intro as my personality in Congress rounds. I wouldn't advocate you use the T intro. It's a terrible introduction. It's a cheesy intro. It has no content. It's a dumb quote. But like, that's who I was, right? I was someone who would do a cheesy, dumb intro and then launch into an argument about like Saudi Arabia arms trades and some geopolitical importance with Yemen. And so if you're somebody who is like that in real life, then embrace it. And don't be afraid of someone saying, oh, that was silly, or that was too pushy, or that was sarcastic or goofy, because like everybody is boring in Congress rounds 80% of the time. So if you're going to be pushy, funny, sarcastic, and goofy, and that's actually who you are, then it will be natural and it will stand out in a really positive fashion. But you can't fake it, right? It has to be authentic.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. And I think that there's been some great advice that's been shared here. And we're going to now talk about a SIN debate. So if you want to work with these awesome instructors and coaches, you can do that and you can work directly with them. I'm sure that they shared some amazing stuff here, but I know that they have much more stuff that they can share when you actually work with them individually at the camp. So my first question about the Ascend Debate Camp is, what makes the Ascend Debate Camp and the fall program that they're going to have this year, what makes that different from all the other camps and instructions that students can be a part of?
Oh yeah, I think there's a few things that make us different. You know, one thing that I don't know how different it makes us, but I think it's what makes us so strong, is that, you know, Sydney and she's from Illinois, I'm from California. We have different experiences, we have different backgrounds, we have different beliefs. I mean, she said earlier how she can be pushy in real life. You know, we've had our arguments over the past few months, and you know, but I think that's part of what makes Ascend special, is we take our collective knowledge, because you know, it's not just Sydney and me. There's plenty of others who are part of the process. And what we do is we take our collective knowledge and we say, okay, what is the best for the students? Can we give them a little bit of everything? Can we say, this is what Emma Sedlak believes. This is why she was such a powerful speaker. This is why Hunter Brown's rhetoric was so, you know, dynamic. And can we teach that? But at the same time, can we teach them why, you know, Sydney and Rohit's logic and data was so strong to win them rounds? Can we actually give them all this? And we say the answer is yes. That's what we have tried to do in our time at Ascend, and give you all these different perspectives. What made all these different debaters so great? So that's one thing. It's just an idea of, we're going to pull everybody's knowledge bases together and give the students the best product possible.
And it's generational. Some camps have just out of high school students who are really good, and they're probably really good coaches, but they have 1 year's worth of experience. And so, you know, at Ascend, I've been coaching for almost 2 years. Quest has been coaching for like infinity years. Nick Vecchio's been coaching for like 3 or 4 years. So it's one thing to be a good debater. I think it's another thing to bring together good coaches. Coaches at Ascend aren't just people with debate accomplishments. They're people who have national finalist or top 6 national ranked students. And that's something that, you know, is pretty unique to have that kind of generational coaching capacity.
Then the other part I would say is, you know, I coach at 2 high schools. I coach at John F. Kennedy High School, where I am sitting right now, actually, and I also coach at James Logan High School. Both are schools in California. And, you know, recent movements talking about the safety of students in speech and debate has been something that it really hits home for me, because I talk to my students all the time about these issues. And I think that is something that when we talked about what is a fall program like, that's what we really wanted to make sure we employed, because we felt like there has been a lack of accountability for coaches, for especially coaches of the private side of speech and debate. There's a lot of accountability for the public side. Well, there's more accountability for the public side. I don't know how about a lot, but we're like this people who work at schools, but not as much on the private side. So we wanted to bring that. That is why all of our coaches are mandated to give anti-bias training and discrimination, bullying training as well. So that way our coaches are not going to be part of the problem. We want to send truly to be a part of the solution. I know Sydney and I have both come from backgrounds where we had to do a lot of things in speech and debate on our own, kind of figure out our own way most of the time. And we saw the hardships that can come when you have to do things on your own and figure it out. And we don't want Ascend to be like that. We don't want Ascend to be another hardship. We wanted Ascend to be an asset, something students feel safe doing, something students feel like they're progressing from doing, and something that they feel like they're going to be able to take out they'll be able to take their skills onto the circuit and feel good about their experience with us. And I think it's definitely not what makes us different from all camps. There's some other camps doing great things for sure. I have a lot of respect for my colleagues, but there's not enough, and that's what we are trying to help set that example, like a lot of the amazing people across this community.
And I will add really quickly that one thing I appreciate that Ascend is doing is having the gender equality within their coaches and having the equality within like the split of men and women coaches. I really appreciate that, because I think that like what Ascend even said was we want to make everyone feel like a part of it and have someone they can connect to. So I really appreciate that Ascend is doing that and working towards gender equality.
Yeah, a lot of my role models in the debate world, and I think this is true for a lot of female debaters, were always male debaters, because that's who was good on my team. Like, there were no women to look up to, right? I was one of the first female captains at my school. I was the first year where we had 2 female captains ever on a team of 200 Congress kids, right? So there's a growing movement. I think we're making good progress. We've done a lot to try and fix the gap that there exists between men and women on the circuit. But even so, there's still a problem. I know I was told to lower my voice my entire debate career from every male coach I had, and every coach I have is a male. So, everybody who ever coached me said lower my voice. And I went into the NSDA finals round with my high-pitched, squeaky voice, and I did perfectly fine without any of their advice for it. And I think that getting those varying perspectives and having people who can say like, yeah, your coach did tell you that. I got told the same thing, but I can offer a different perspective. And sometimes it's even across gender lines, but regional lines, experience lines, local circuits, right? Different kinds of family backgrounds, making sure that our students have access to just a variety of coaches with really different lived experiences ensures that we're maximizing not just diversity of experience, but also diversity of knowledge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's true for, students, of all backgrounds. You always want to kind of look up somebody who looks like you. I came from a league where I was the only student I was one of many men. We had almost no women in my league doing Congress, but it was all white men. I was the only student of color doing congressional debate at all. There's actually a picture of an award ceremony I was in where it is white men in Quest, just literally across the board. And I think the only way we start to break that barrier is by bringing in the people who have figured out how to break those barriers before, and show you, there are people who look like you, who, can relate to your experience, who still find major success in this activity. And by highlighting those voices and giving those voices the platform through Ascend to do what they already do. We're not special in that regard. They already do it. We're just trying to help them get the platform. We feel like the students who can relate to them will feel more comfortable taking those skills and taking themselves going out onto the circuit and doing as well as they can.
Well, that's awesome. And then in terms of the student activities, what activities is Ascend planning on doing for the fall program?
Yeah, so our fall program consists of 15 weeks. Each week has 4 hours of practice. They're set into 2 2-hour segments. And what's really nice is if you just, get a coach, not at a school, but just on your own terms, there isn't necessarily a curriculum, but Ascend has a built-in curriculum that brings debaters to make sure they know everything that they should know in an order that makes sense. So going back to Quest House metaphor, we're not going to throw crystals at you when you don't have a solid speech structure, because you're not going to have a good crystal, right? And Quest and I don't even think crystals should exist, but that's a second problem. So the main point here is Ascend's curriculum is unique in that it builds as time goes on. So we start out the beginning of this fall with some very basic lessons. Lessons include short lectures from our championship staff. They include drills, both that we practice together and that you can take home and practice on your own time. They also include like practice that's not drills, right? So group practice, open time to ask questions or to just try skills out. Then there are also mocks. So every student who's in the fall program has about 7 to 8 mocks over the course of the fall. Those mocks are judged by our championship staff again, and they are going to be on bills you'll be debating at real tournaments. So we have mocks on Glenbrooks bills, Yale's bills, those kinds of things. And so you're going to get a chance to do the debate with other really good debaters before you go to the actual debate, which is an invaluable experience in my experience as a debater. There are also prep sessions. You don't have to be an Ascend Fall Program student to attend our prep sessions. Any student can come. You can get just one prep session. We have them for the UK season opener, for Blue Key, Bronx, Yale, and Glenbrooks. And these are 3-hour-long sessions with Nick DeVito where you bring your questions and he brings answers. And they're tournament specific. So these are going to cover like, hey, this legislation has no neg. And then Nick tells you, what about these things? Did you consider this way of looking at it? And you're like, oh, wow, that's so smart. Or I have a speech, can I give this contention and can we talk about fluency? And you'll get some individualized feedback on that. So the program kind of brings together the lecture components, the mock components, some drills, and then it also covers some other things like presiding. We will have some information about like, how do I debate sensitive issues? Because that's a skill that many students, don't know how to gain. Like, how do I debate a tough topic that can be hard to talk about? Or things like developing yourself as a personal debater. How do you become the best you? As you can tell, Quest and I care a lot about that. So it's something that is built into our curriculum. And you can find the information to sign up for the fall program at ascendspeech.org. There's a drop-down tab for fall program, and there's a separate drop-down tab for the prep sessions. Like I said, prep sessions are no strings attached. Come once, and if we never see you again, we'll be sad, but nothing happens. And the fall program is that comprehensive 60-hour curriculum. If you miss a session or two of the fall session, nothing happens. There's no punishment. So if you're worried that you won't be able to make every single one, that's not a reason not to do it. And we do offer financial aid. So if you're listening to this and you're like, wow, Quest and Sydney sounds so cool. I would love to be a part of this program. Quest is thinking doesn't sound cool, but we do offer financial aid. So if that's a concern you have, please do reach out. And we are absolutely happy to talk to any student in any situation. Accessibility is really important. We want every student who wants to be part of Ascend to find a way for you to be part of Ascend. We are committed to making it happen.
That makes a ton of sense. And I just want to add really quickly that a lot of the people who I've interviewed, especially for congressional debate, are Ascend coaches. And so if you really want to like watch these people and you get out a lot out of these interviews, like definitely go and take the next step and like learn from them personally. Go to a prep session with like Nick DeVito. I've interviewed him before and all these awesome people. And Ascend has been really awesome to this channel to kind of get some of the awesome content you see. Like one of the highest performing videos on this channel is the full congressional debate round provided by Ascend. So if you like what you see and you want to like learn better and learn more personally, I would totally recommend you check out Ascend. There'll be a link in the description. So just check it out, go to a prep session and then sign up for the fall program.
Thank you so much for having us, Nathan. We really, really appreciate it. I would also mention that Ascend has a video up also on Nathan's channel with Jack Fitzgerald, and it's an introductory to Congress video. So if you're a new congressional debate student, there are no resources out there. I mean, like, just to be honest, there's nothing. I mean, Nathan's channel is a bright spot in a very dark world of congressional resources available for free online. So take advantage of these kinds of resources that are available to you. And that one is a very comprehensive, hey, here's Congress, let's get you going kind of lesson.
And I also want to say thank you, Nathan, for having us on. You're doing amazing work here with the YouTube channel. I'm so glad that you're doing it. Really, I hope you keep it going. I've definitely referred some of my students to it as well, and I would refer any student who's interested in not just Congress, but you've also had some other guests, across many different events on to talk. So yeah, thank you.